Hello everybody, I'm LindaBradley, Associate Professor at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden, and I'm going to talk about designs of mall for newly arrived migrants as part of this Mall SIG Symposium. So I'm looking forward to our discussions also. Now, one of the areas that I'm currently working with is within refugee studies and integration studies, where I have several projects regarding newly arrived migrants to Sweden. It started in 2015 with Arabic-speaking migrants, but it has also evolved to include other migrants as well in Sweden. And it's about learning the language, the Swedish language, and finding ways into society. So the presentation will bring up Arabic-speaking migrants to Sweden, and the reasoning can be generalized to a larger context, I would say. So let's start. Now, with the Mall and Arabic migrants, it's a natural thing, as a lot of the Arabic migrants have smartphones with them when they come to Sweden, and they stay connected with their friends and family in their home country. So this large influx of people has also implied that they are now using mobile phones informally, primarily within social media use. But there is also, at the same time, a very harsh competition in society around education and work, where technology has a big role. Because if you don't know technology, how to use technology, then you're lagging behind to get a job. And also learning the Swedish language, of course, is an important aspect as well. So it's very important to learn the language to get a place in the workplace. Now, since I mentioned that I've been doing this since 2015, we have had some recurrent research questions in our project, which are around how is mobile technology used by Arabic migrants to learn the Swedish language? What are the language learning needs of Arabic migrants? And what are common design and content features in Mall apps? Now, the more projects that I was mentioning are, if we look at the first one to the left here, it was the first project in 2015 about pronunciation and speech practice. It was a specific app that a newly arrived used to learn the Swedish language. Particularly some of the sounds were new to them, since they had never heard Swedish before, and it was locally funded by EuroCALL, this project. Now, we published an article, as you can see here in the bottom. I've also added articles we've published or we're underway publishing, and I've also included a list of references in the end of this presentation if you would like my presentation. Now, in the middle was the Minclusion project, which was a project dealing with everyday phrases and sound practice for Arabic-speaking migrants between 2016 and 17. And it was EU funded by AMIF. And it was about how to develop an app specifically designed for Arabic speakers. And the final one to the right here, which is an ongoing project. I'm sitting now in the way of this. I'll move a bit. It's called Digital Communication at Work, and it's finishing now in September, and we will then apply for the continuation. It's funded by Vinnova, Sweden's innovation agency, and in Swedish you can read Hitta jobb i Sverige, which means find a job in Sweden, because our projects have evolved to the workplace learning, vocational learning, and language learning at the workplace. Now, the user needs that I was mentioning that will guide the app usage, they're then largely geared at social media, and to the right there you recognize Facebook and also WhatsApp, the green phone to the right. So those are used a lot, specifically WhatsApp with Arabic speakers. And you need the app for learning the language, of course, developing digital literacy even further so that you go beyond the social media aspects and come to what Rosel Aguilar, who is then classification of apps, is something that he has been dealing with, where language learning is categorized according to 3 groups that he proposes, one of them being the social media apps, the other one being dictionaries that people use for language learning, and the third category would be apps that are developed specifically for language learning purposes, like Bazoo or Duolingo, for instance. So developing digital literacy for sure, and then validating your education, getting a job, communicating with authorities, finding ways in society, developing networks, new networks, and socializing with others. So they're doing a lot. And some people are more inclined to be integrated than others. As you can see, the green ones are successful ones, and the red ones are supposed to then show those who are not. And it all boils down to the language, actually. So a lot of research is pointing in that direction, where then MALL could be a way forward that would facilitate for learning the language. Now, we have been using various methods over the years, as you probably understand. The most important ones, I would say, would be the individual and focus group interviews. So we have interviewed a few hundred people, recently arrived migrants, and also teachers in Swedish as a second language, non-profit organizations, mentors, authorities, private companies. So since everybody who comes to Sweden, they're offered a program to learn the Swedish language, which is the Swedish as a foreign language program, a national one with its curriculum in Sweden, a national curriculum. So we have then studied those schools, people participating in these programs. So before you can get a job, you need to have a certain level of Swedish, and also before entering into further education, you need more Swedish. We've had surveys, of course, and observations, and also logging of use of these apps that we have been working with. And when it comes to the theoretical approach, then we are also then leaning on a few different ones, because concerning learning theories, this is also in line with what Stockwell states in 2021, that there are various theories connected to MALL research. And already in 2006, Levy and Stockwell suggested that practitioners often draw on multiple theories. They call it theoretical pluralism. So motivation theory, the first one here, is one which is really important to be motivated in order to use certain parts to have a drive to move forward in terms of communicating with others. Not learning the perfect grammar or writing perhaps, but the everyday phrases and the everyday learning that surrounds everybody. So that is for sure one important aspect. Self-directed language learning, which we have also explored a lot, where, for instance, if we look at the example to the right here, we can see from a WhatsApp group with informal learning, where I'm actually engaging with an Arabic speaker who I know who would like to learn Swedish, and he speaks English, which is not very common with Arabic speakers. They don't know English before that much. So he asked, for instance, how do you say bless you to someone after sneezing? Then I record it, and then I write what it is, and it's prosit. And man säger prosit när någon nyser, which means you say prosit when somebody sneezes in Swedish. So this is the informal way of learning, engaging together with others, which is a very important aspect for learning with migrants. Also socio-cultural perspectives to learning, of course, which is what this is when you're engaging in learning with others with social media and MALL as mediating tools. Organization theory is another one that we are now also exploring, which is then how people can organize learning also in society. Now, this tree here from rootedinlanguage.com, I find that this is showing some of the complexities that we see with the Swedish for immigrants, which is then taken out of necessity, because people who come here are not necessarily interested in learning language as such, but they would like to speak the language, but then taking the classes may be very difficult for some of them, and specifically when you don't know English. So a lot of the apps available, for instance Duolingo, there is very little content between Swedish and Arabic, for instance. Arabic is a very large language, and Swedish, of course, is only spoken by some 10 million people, so it's a less spoken language, and therefore it's not easy for them to find direct links to their own language. And so you need to have what we see in the root, the grammar and vocabulary, and also the skills, reading, writing, listening, speaking in the tree here. And then on the branches and up in the twigs, we will see that there are also some aspects that are very difficult to learn. For instance, the tone and voice, and also the non-verbal expressions, and what is the audience awareness, for instance. So some of these aspects are difficult. Now, the common features in language apps which makes it very difficult for people to feel motivated, which is what we see when using, for instance, Duolingo, is that it's technology driven. So there is a lot of multiple choice, as you can see here, right or wrong answers. And then they're trying to implement gamification, as you can see here. And like Jack Burston, I know that he's been writing a lot about this technology-driven aspects, that it's complicating things since the pedagogy is left out, and there are few instructions for people. And if you would like to learn something just in time, for instance, you're catching the bus and would like to say something to a bus driver, how can you then learn through an app, which is quite complicated sometimes. So there is for sure something that we have explored in the apps that we've looked into, insufficient feedback in apps designed for language learning. So explanations are missing. So even if you get the correct answer, you choose the correct answer in an app, like in the Duolingo app here to the left, there is little information about why that was correct. So if you settle with it being correct, then what would you learn from it? And in the middle is one where you're supposed to organize letters in a specific order. So it's an oven in Swedish, and it can be also young, which is the same letters, but in a different order in Swedish. So what that would be pronounced differently in Swedish. So oven is ugn, and young is ung. So it's not exactly the same, and the reasons behind this you never get to find out if you're putting in the right or wrong answers. Also, a third example is from the Mango app, and it's Arabic, learning Arabic, and you're supposed to imitate a phrase. So you record, and then you can compare yourself with this visual here, compare with the app, the pronunciation, with this intonation curve. However, how that should be interpreted is extremely difficult for someone to figure out. So those are some difficulties in apps for people who just download something informally to learn something, a new language like Arabic's learning Swedish. Now, so there is a great interest among the newly arrived migrants. This is the finalizing my presentation. So from our results, we see that people do download a lot of these apps that are there, 3 to 5 downloaded mall apps, with a lot of word lists that you should drill and learn by heart. So it's asking a lot from the learner, where you need to be self-directed to engage in this. And they're not used more than just initially, and then they're discarded. So we fall back to SMS texting as the most common functionality used for learning also within the SFE, the Swedish as a Foreign Language class. The teacher may send a text message to students, but not engaging much through other means of learning. And also translation tools, they're used a lot also. So they're very enthusiastic at first, but then it's very difficult to maintain this interest in apps that are not providing much feedback really. So that is again, after SMS, we fall back to face-to-face communication as the preferred mode. So this is then the outcomes that I have mentioned, that we do see a lot of the apps being used initially. People have a lot of interest. You see these two ladies here in the middle who are part of a workshop where they wanted to learn more Swedish to get a job, and then they also need to maintain that interest, and it's very hard with apps that are not providing more than the right or wrong answer. So you need also to have some other means, some other communication means within apps. So that's basically a very brief, very, very condensed version of my research currently, and I'm really happy to discuss more with you. Thank you very much for listening.